and welcome to It's About Youth. I'm your host Fanashe, and today we are at a very beautiful setting here in Langkawi at Frangipani Resort and Spa Hotel at the sideline of the UNICEF's ASEAN Children and Youth Climate Summit 2025. Now over 100 delegates, youth delegates are here from across ASEAN to talk about climate action and to advocate for stronger climate action in the ahead of the ASEAN ministerial meeting on the environment happening right now. Right, beside me are two young delegates from the program, Faith, a delegate from Malaysia, as well as Coco from the Philippines. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys.
My pleasure.
Right, okay. Let's talk about why you are here and what have you learned so far and where are you from, essentially. So both of you have taken quite unique paths in climate advocacy. Could you share with me what first sparked your involvement in this space and what keeps you motivated? Maybe Faith, we can start with you.
Sure thing. I think what initially kicked me off was honestly by accident. As a person who's been growing up in KL, especially the more urban sector, I don't think I was really exposed to a lot of the environmental and climate issues, especially because we've been conditioned to be in malls, to walk across the river that has been concretized, to the point that I see it more as a drain, especially the Klang River in my city. So that's one point where I only found out like years after when I stumbled upon climate activism, and that's how I slowly figured out that, oh, there's something wrong, inherently wrong in our perception of the world, and if we don't focus on something to make some amendments to our future, that there won't be any future for us. I think that's how I first started, and it's very recent, just 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's very inspiring to see, young climate advocates, being out there and talking about real change. Coco, what about you?
I think it's kind of similar to your story, actually.
Okay.
When we experience unnatural events like disasters over and over again, it almost feels like it's the norm. So I never really questioned it, even if I personally have an experience surviving typhoon before. It was during the sophomore year of college. I was going through different articles, and I found a study about the experience of this fishing community in the Philippines after Typhoon Odette. And when I was reading their stories, I started seeing patterns, and I said, wait, that's kind of similar to what my grandmother experienced a few years ago during Typhoon Yolanda. That's kind of similar to what I experienced during Typhoon Ondoy. And then eventually, putting people at the center of climate education, it becomes clear that it allows us to see the climate crisis beyond this abstract concept or issue to a gut issue. So it's no longer just about flooding or drought like we usually know in textbooks. It's also about loss of shelter, loss of livelihood. So yeah, that's definitely how I started. It sparked a lot of emotions. I'm very fortunate to be part of a community of young people, which he is also a part of, which definitely helped me in exploring or processing that emotion and be productive with it. So I think that's also what's keeping me motivated today to keep working.
Right. I mean, that's really inspiring. I think from your take just now, nothing much has changed if you're talking about how your ancestors are experiencing, your grandma, and then, you yourself. Do you think we can elaborate or talk a little bit more about, you're a flood and typhoon survivor in the Philippines. Your advocacy is deeply personal. How has that experience shaped your perspective on climate justice?
All right. It definitely made me realize that it's happening to the same people over and over again. For example, with my grandfather, his house was also flooded around that same time. We live in adjacent cities, and his house was flooded almost past the second floor. And he would tell me stories about how him and his neighbors would build bridges to connect the rooftops from one another so that they could cross and exchange food. So that was a very traumatizing experience for him. And it was also quite similar to my grandmother, who was a few years later, who was living in a different island, and they were basically trying to survive another typhoon. And in my head, I was thinking, it's always happening to the same people who do not really emit that much carbon emissions, if that makes sense. Like my grandfather never had a car.
Right.
He takes public transportation. So does my grandmother. She also plants vegetables at the back of their farm. So it doesn't make sense that it happens to the same group of people, and it made me very frustrated about it as well. It's not fair that they have to rebuild every year,
Right.
because we get typhoons every year.
Right.
It's not about resilience anymore. That's not resilience. That's forced survival. So that's what made me realize that this is a question of justice.
Right. I mean, climate change don't discriminate, honestly.
Definitely.
Yeah. For the young people, for the older people, like you said, your ancestors even, the threat is very real and it's happening, a lot more these days. I mean, Malaysia, for example, we have a few years back, very horrible floods that affected a lot of people and cost the government billions. So I think, it's across the region. Southeast Asia is one of the most vulnerable region to natural disasters and climate risks. Definitely something that young people like you guys are advocating for, better climate action. So on that, Faith, coming from a youth perspective here, what do young people actually bring to this conversation, right? What is it that your take or the youth's take that is so different from the older generation or other people who are advocating for climate action?
I think the first thing would be the difference in our depth of experiences. Of course, when the older generations, in a bit of a stark contrast to what Coco said, right? Because on her side, over generations, they have experienced something that has been there as a constant variable. But for, I think, my generation, I haven't really had experiences by the riverside as my ancestors did.
Right.
So it's more of a disparity of depth of experiences that I think comes from this idea of different feelings towards the river as well. That's why, on my perspective, I really struggled to find a deep emotional connection to the river, especially since I perceive it more as a drain. Whereas I know that my grandparents, that my uncles and aunties, they would tell me how they spend like after school sessions by the river to catch fish, to like spend time nearby in more rural areas. It's very accessible to them. But I, as someone listening this story in the present day and age, I cannot for the life of me relate.
Right.
And that also frustrates me to a certain extent, because number one, I feel the heat wave many of the times, yes, and for adults that would tell me, you guys are complaining so much that back in my day it wasn't like this, and there's a lot, and then I would always have the question, it wasn't like this, but why do I have to feel
Why do I have to go
this
through
environment at the moment? Because the environment really shapes us. Like it or not, we are the results of our environment. I know a lot of people who migrate out of Malaysia because they say that the heat kills their creativity. The heat destroys whatever brain function they need to be successful and to be on time to show up for work. I think that's also why it inspired me to bring more awareness, if not a sense of belonging, or if not action. Because before we even go to a step to some productive action, there needs to be a feeling of this matters to me, which I don't think a lot of young people have. As even my peers, my closest friends, they struggle to see why I do this.
Right. If we're at here, by the sea, if we talk about coral bleaching, for example, the corals used to be so nice, either in Langkawi or Perhentian or Redang, and it's not like that anymore. Biodiversity loss, species loss and all that. There's so much that your generation, I guess my generation as well, slightly older youth, we don't get to experience, and you're right, and we miss out on all this, right? Okay, before we go for break, many young advocates face barriers. We know this when it comes to advocating for climate action, right? So, in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges you face when advocating and navigating these challenges? Maybe Coco, we can start with you.
Thank you. I think I have two answers for that. One is quite similar to what you just said earlier about these different experiences. It's quite difficult sometimes to remind the older generation of the urgency of this problem, because a lot of them have already gotten used, as I mentioned earlier. When you experience unnatural things repeatedly over a period of time, it eventually appears to be the norm.
Right.
So for older people, like you said, I've had that experience before with my dad. I was telling him it's so hard to commute to school because of how hot it is. And he was like, I did that when I was younger.
Yeah.
It's different now. So we have to understand it changes. So that's definitely one of the challenges. But going, tapping into the stories of youth organizations and young people like us, especially maybe referring to these youth organizations that I work with in the Philippines, who are actively trying to address climate change. One of their biggest challenges right now really is securing funding. And we're talking about sustainable funding. It's not just like a one-time thing. One-off thing. They need a support, institutional support that recognize that what they're doing is important, so that they could continue doing it and then give the leadership to the next generation, so that they continue the progress in all of that. So I think those are the gaps that we need to work on, especially now that we are recognizing that the crisis is becoming more complex.
Right. Faith?
I think there are two layers to this question. One would be for people who want to be involved in this action, but they don't know where to reach, or maybe it's their first step,
exposure,
and they don't know how to gain momentum to that first step. That would be a lack of platforms that are actively reaching out to these swaths of people that are available, or even they have a twinge in their heart to be like, okay, I know that this is wrong. I need to be actively involved. But
where do I start?
Where do I start? And in a world with so many distractions, to be easily sucked into the digital media where you can just be a Netflix subscription away from forgetting all your troubles.
Yeah.
You know,
we're all guilty of that sometimes.
It's really tough to capture their attention and to have a retention rate, which is why I think platforms are really important. And I don't, even though there are many established platforms in Malaysia, as a young person myself, back in the day, I do know of their existence, but how are they reaching out? And how is the retention rate that makes them feel something on an emotional level, rather than spoon feeding you to a thought level? Yeah, I think that's the first stage.
And the second
layer in terms of the hardship would be, yes, definitely funding. But also I feel is the lack of resources available, creative resources, because funding is just one form of resource. There's also the resource of time, the resource of talent, the resource of experience, which I feel many people are, organizations especially for those who mean well but are stuck in silos, they would need to have a platform again to reach out for different resources that are available, perhaps in different people who specialize in specific drainage systems, people who specialize in media to connect drainage to the public. You know, all these are, it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's inspiring that you two take the time to actually, talk about this and actually do, on-ground work. But sometimes I'm scared, even when we talk about this here, when we go back, this thing is being sidelined or put to the back, because there's so many other issues that are put at the front, cost of living, all that. So we want to talk more about your personal, climate advocacy in your countries, but we have to go for a quick break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to It's About Youth. We are here in Langkawi, Frangipani Resort and Spa. And I'm here with two young delegates from UNICEF's ASEAN Climate and Youth Climate Summit 2025 at the sideline. And we also have the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on the Environment happening right now. We have discussed just now about, their climate advocacy work, some of the challenges, and some of the barriers that they face. I want to dive a little bit deeper on, ASEAN as a region. We have both someone from Philippines and someone from Malaysia to talk about this. So, Faith, let's start with you. The Klang River Festival, that's the climate advocacy that you work in. You focus on co-developing youth-led solutions, right? So, what lessons from local actions that can be scaled up to inform national or even ASEAN-wide strategies?
I think for my organization, we prioritize the spirit of gongxi. So it's bergongxi and it's the spirit of sharing resources. And I think this, at a youth level, it's almost very intuitive because in the classroom, we have friends, we have even cliques even, like to discuss and to share our life experience that bleeds into our work and even after school. I think that would also apply to, if we scale it up, it would apply to different organizations, especially once we get out of school. Where do we find the classroom mindset again?
Right.
Where do we find the people that are readily available with different experiences to do that? I think one very ready example is where we are right now, that we can have a talk with people from ASEAN from different countries, and the vast difference in our experiences sometimes shock me as well. There's definitely a bit of culture shock involved, but that's helpful. It sparks growth, and it also gives me a lot of material to work with when thinking of what the future holds in my programs. And I think these can definitely be scaled up into a national level, if not a regional level.
Right.
Yeah.
It's, I think, sharing resources and best practices as well, and your shared experience when it comes to climate change. The Philippines, for example, Indonesia with transboundary haze, and you have Cambodia, you have Myanmar, we have Thailand. All these people are experiencing some sort of natural disaster, climate risk, that we can really, lay down, what's the root causes of this and what can we take to our country, right? Coco, your work touches on climate justice, gender and regional cooperation, right? If you can explain a little bit what you do and how can ASEAN member states make space for youth perspective, especially when policies are often state-centric.
I really think there's a need to invest on these youth-led initiatives. Again, I work with a lot of youth organizations in the Philippines, and they've been doing a lot of great work in their local communities. And you're right, there's different kinds of ways to support them because there's different kinds of support that they would need, from financial to time and all of that. But they're all able to do this in a creative way.
Right.
And imagine what they could do more with actual institutional support. So I think what ASEAN as a region could do is to really tap into these youth organizations, bring down all of these, bring down opportunities for them to be able to showcase these programs and initiatives, and maybe be able to help them scale that from grassroots level to provincial level, and then maybe start doing best practices exchange across cities and something like that. And something that I've also been talking about with members of our network of young people, we've talked about this desire to be part of the entire process, not just at the beginning when they're asking about what to add in the commitments, what to sign. I mean, all of that's good.
It's not a token.
Yeah,
right, token participation.
For this to be actually youth participation, I think it would be great if in the process of implementation, for example, they tap into our network and then see how we can support at the same time. Other than that, maybe for the evaluation process, if there's any way for us to also comment on it or to provide our feedback, so that we are part of the entire process from start to finish. So I think that's what true youth participation means. Not just from the beginning where you ask, where organizations ask about what we want, what our demands are.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And I think the summit hosted by UNICEF, ACYCS, I think really opened, the eyes of a lot of youth and hopefully a lot of policymakers as well. When we talk about policymakers and experts, when we talk about climate action, it's always very top-bottom approach. And, they include all this, net zero, carbon capture, but they lack the real impact when it comes to how youth are having climate anxieties, in fear of what the future is going to hold. I think those are the ones that are missing in our conversation these days when it comes to policies, right? Right, I see you're smiling, so I must be right. Right, okay. Leading up to, the ASEAN AMME is happening right now as we speak. And some of the delegates will actually go and present their climate recommendations to the ministers there, to the ASEAN ministers there. So I want your take now. So following the meeting, the MME, what would you like ASEAN ministers to hear directly from your mouth, from young people, in terms of priorities, whether it's adaptation, climate finance, community resilience, you name it. What's your take on this?
You want to start?
Yeah.
I think repetition is key to repeat what we've said just now. We don't want to be just tokens.
Right.
We also recognize very well that without the help of the people who are actually doing policy work, the people who are on a ministerial level, without their help to show us the way, to give us a pipeline to where they are right now, it's definitely two different worlds that we are looking at. And we cannot just muddle around with a lack of productivity when there's no solution of a stepping stone for the youth to go step by step to generate this level of stewardship in everyone, that all these organizations that we are in. So it definitely, from my perspective, in my organization as well, it's a pipeline that I want to envision, that I believe everyone will feel less lost once it is ingrained in our system.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of youth, at the summit just now have a lot of already groundwork, grassroots initiatives. And I think, like you said, the problem is you have this and you want to keep it going, but you don't know where to go next without the creative resources that you mentioned, the funding that you mentioned, the pool of people.
There needs to be a sharing of resources
Right.
all through. So circular economy.
Okay, Coco, you're at the table and ASEAN ministers are in front of you. What will you say to them?
Co-create with us. I think, again, within the network that I'm a part of, and just to, if it's okay to say the name, we're called the Kabataang Resilient Network or Resilient Youth Network. There's so many different youth organizations in the Philippines who are doing a lot and really good things to advocate for climate justice and just transition and all that. And I think what matters right now is that we're provided a seat at the table. Not just at the sidelines, so that we could comment.
Not just for the photo op.
Exactly, that came from you. But to also co-create these decisions and these plans with us. I'm not sure what's the hesitation with this, but we're definitely more than capable if provided the chance. And just one look at all of these things that young people have already accomplished all over Southeast Asia, just in Southeast Asia, I'm not even talking about the entire globe, you'll see that young people are capable when given the opportunity.
Right.
So please, co-create with us.
Right. I mean, I can concur. I've been doing this show for quite some time already. And I have a lot of young, passionate, people on here who have very bold ideas and who are ready for change, but are sometimes just stuck. And I think, it's people like you guys who are here, who are trying to voice out like, hey, look at us, we're trying to do something, please help us. I think we need more of that, definitely. All right, we only have time for one more question. Finally, what advice would you give to young people across Southeast Asia who would want to join climate movement but don't know where to start? Okay.
I think as much as I try, or with other organizations try, to be the platform for people to come, if you have the wish or if you feel an urge to begin something, you just do it. No matter how small, it will have a ripple effect, because you cannot underestimate how powerful your voice is. It will compound, and just like interest over time, you would thank your past younger self on your actions to be a better person, because that choice would also shape your environment at the time, and those decisions that you make to shape your environment will further compound to shape who you are today.
And hopefully we'll stop the cycle that you mentioned just now, you know, the ancestors and the grandma and you and future generations. Stop the cycle of, you know, climate risk affecting across generations, right? Coco, what about you?
I think community is important. When I started, after reading that article that I mentioned earlier, it took me 2 more years before I could actually start working in the movement, because I felt like everyone already knows what they're doing. They already have their groups. I don't know exactly what to specialize on, if that's even a thing. So I think community is very important. For those who are already starting, for those who are already part of the movement, I think it would be really a really good idea to start networks or communities where you can welcome in new people who are still trying to navigate this movement that we're trying to do. So in the Philippines, that's exactly what my work is with Kabataang Resilient Network. We're trying to gather all of these young people, not only to provide them the platform to participate in decision making or to provide them with the support they need with their projects, but also for them to talk with one another. We want a unified and cohesive movement, especially youth movement. And you would see that all of these really good projects happening in different islands in one country, they can do a lot with just like meeting and like sitting down at a table and talking with one another. We did this last time about this project or this problem. And then this exchange not only provides a safe space for people who are still navigating the movement, but it also provides a platform for young people who are already in the movement to strengthen and expand their work, what they're currently doing at this point in time.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a nice way to end it. I think from our discussions here, one thing I can take away is support, right? It's be it community support, resource support, funding support, network support. It's the key to get the ground running for a lot of youth-led organization that you both are part of, and we thank you for you know, just doing it and being out there and doing the dirty work and making sure that your voices are heard. And I think we can just all hope for change, especially now we're at, you know, MME and we have the ASEAN ministers here and we want to talk to them and make sure our voices are heard. So yeah, thank you so much, both of you, Faith and Coco, for being here with me to talk about climate advocacy and how youth are leading in driving solutions. That's all the time we have here in Langkawi at this very, very beautiful setting and at the sideline of the ACYCS Summit in the lead up to MME. That's it. I'm Fana Shea. Thank you for watching. Bye.